case people haven't watched any of our lives before.
Okay.
Um, and then this is just about like how do you feel about immigration? Do you think even in light of Trump, it's still impossible? Is it still something that people can do? Just to get your thoughts and
Yeah.
perspectives.
Well, that's good.
All right, so I'll go ahead and tell them to get started. And it'll say, actually, I
Yeah,
think we're
let's stick around after, if you don't mind, after we're done, because something just occurred to me about the discussion that we're going to have. Actually, it might even come up now
mhm.
about what they're doing with students. That's a
Oh
little
yeah, 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 yeah.
kind
But
of,
but I think I think we're ready to get started.
yeah.
I think most people are ready here and everything else. So, Leon, thank you so much for being with us. My name is Chris Richardson. I'm the president and general counsel of BDV Solutions. I've been with BDV for about 6 years and really focused on the EB-3 world, which I'm proud of the thousands of people that we've been able to help through the process. Leon, can you talk a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. I am currently a partner at Seyfarth Shaw in Washington, D.C. I'm one of the co-chairs of our immigration compliance and enforcement team. Ours is actually one of the larger law firm-based immigration practices in the country. Before I joined Seyfarth in 2017, I served as director of USCIS, which I suspect a lot of the folks on this call will know what those initials mean, but for those who don't, that's U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. And I served in that capacity after having served in other leadership roles in the Obama administration, both at the Department of Justice and the Department of Health and Human Services. Most of my career otherwise has been as a prosecutor, mostly in the federal government, but also in the city of New York.
Perfect. And so you know a lot about immigration, and you've been around immigration for a while now. One big concern that I think we all have is just on what's going on in Washington. It seems like we read our newspapers or read our news online, or we get stories like every day. There's like some crazy new thing going on in Washington out of the current administration. What do you think is some of the challenges that we're seeing? Like, what do you think of them, and what do you think about people if they're like, I don't know, if this is the time, like, to get involved in the legal immigration system because it's just too hard right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think we are seeing certain challenges, but actually, and I think we should talk about what those challenges are. But I think it's a good point to understand the difference between this Trump administration and the one that started in 2017 when I first started in private practice.
Mhm.
And a key difference back in that period was that you had a lot of emphasis on this idea of buy American, hire American, and that this became a basis to uh, really make the employment-based visa process a lot more difficult
Mhm.
than it had been before, and that affected potential immigrants in all kinds of employment-based categories. Um, that is different now. While there's still certainly an emphasis on buy American, and that's evidenced by
Mhm.
President Trump's imposition on tariffs on Canada, Mexico,
Mhm.
countries in Europe, China. Um, you have not seen the same emphasis on hire American.
Yeah, man, that's
And,
interesting. That's
and
really
so
interesting.
that's one area where I think
Mhm.
things should not be seen as issues or problems, because for the most part, I think that is an area where, absent really significant scenarios of discrimination, we haven't seen anything from this administration so far
Mhm.
that suggests they're particularly targeting foreign national workers. With that said, there are other areas where they clearly are in keeping with their national security and public safety focus, where they have been very aggressive and have been making some pretty dramatic changes in the world of immigration. Probably the one that is most consequential across the board is the redefinition of birthright citizenship. And since, going back 130 years now, the assumption of the U.S. courts, the way our federal legal system is structured, the way our state legal systems are structured, assumes that with certain very specific exceptions, if you are born in the United States, that makes you a U.S. citizen. So that U.S. birth certificate from whatever state you were born in becomes your evidence of being a U.S. citizen.
Right.
And what the administration has said in this birthright citizenship executive order is that they will no longer recognize that interpretation of the Constitution with respect to anybody other than a legal permanent resident or U.S. citizen. And therefore, if you're a non-immigrant visa holder, you're here on an F1 student visa, you're here on a H-2B, you're here on a J visa, you're here on an H-1B, you're a refugee, you're an asylee, you're a humanitarian parolee, you're undocumented, obviously, that your children are not recognized as U.S. citizens and will not be given documentation such as passports and other documentation consistent with their being U.S. citizens.
But a lot of that stuff's being challenged in court, which is what we anticipate. And I assume that the courts are going to probably side with the people who want birthright citizenship at the end of the day. If anything, do you think that that's, I look at this effort on the part of the administration, probably understanding that this probably won't get through the courts, as just a way to show their supporters and base, hey, we're doing all we can on this. Like, I almost from my perspective, I would almost rather they fight over like birthright citizenship, which I don't think they're going to win, than put their effort and energy into like EB-5 or EB-3 or how do we get to make the legal immigration. Like, to me, it feels like, and I'd love to get your thoughts on that. It feels like, you know what, if you guys think that you can win that and court, great, go for it. Just leave employment-based visa alone.
No, I agree. I think this might be a little bit of a political candy for certain, certain parts of the coalition that got them into the White House. But I agree that even the Supreme Court, which is, in many respects been pretty supportive of President Trump, probably will not be able to find the logic to support what they've done in this executive order. There are other areas that are more concerning for employment-based immigrants, one of which is the announcement by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission that they would be focusing on scenarios of discrimination against U.S. workers. And while that is, I think, predominantly focused on the hiring of undocumented workers to the potential exclusion of authorized U.S. workers, that this is something that could potentially adversely affect certain people in certain visa categories, like the EB-5 or the EB-3. I don't think it, very much like birthright citizenship, I don't think at the end they're going to be able to make much of a dent with that, but it is the kind of thing that's going to cause a little bit of potential litigation. And
I got to say that I'm surprised that, and I think this goes back to a point you made earlier. The last time there was a Trump administration, there was, the Muslim ban came out, I think day one. The public charge stuff came out day one, day two. There seemed to be a bunch of stuff that just came out almost instantaneously. It felt like an attack on the employment-based immigration system that doesn't seem to be happening now. Do you think that there are battles within the White House, within USCIS, over a lot of these issues, and that maybe Elon Musk and his Doge people are keeping a lot of the other stuff at bay?
Oh, I think so. I mean, Elon Musk has been, pretty outspoken on the importance of, employment-based immigration. He was talking more about H-1Bs than EB-3s, but the president's response is what matters, because the president said, "Oh, I use them too." But what he really meant were H-2B, who are workers who don't necessarily need to have any education at all. They work, landscaping, work in hotels, and so, I think the president, and I have other reason to believe this, the president, whatever you may think about a lot of things he's doing, he is pro-business at the end of the day, and I think recognizes that these are things that help U.S. businesses.
Right. And thinking about that, because President Trump has said quite frequently as of late, hey, you know what? I believe in legal immigration. I support legal immigration. We want legal immigration. Do you think that there's space for potential immigration reform that would help with visa retrogression, for example, or even increase the number of employment-based green cards that are available?
There's always space. This is one thing, I actually counsel companies on sort of political strategy with respect to visas. And, one of the things I always tell them is you need to be ready for the opportunity to advance your immigration reform agenda, because the opportunity could come up at any time. We could look like we are in the darkest moment, and there's nobody's getting along up on Capitol Hill, and serious anti-immigrant sentiment in the country. And it may turn out that actually creates exactly the conditions necessary, that exactly what I just described creates the political conditions necessary for immigration reform. We don't know when it's going to happen. So I absolutely think there's hope for some meaningful solution to the retrogression, some meaningful growth in the visa numbers, so that it actually reflects the size of our economy. I mean, it's almost ridiculous how little the current numbers do reflect
Right.
the size of our economy.
It's interesting that Tom Homan is the head of ICE, or the head of this deportation effort on behalf of the Trump administration, and you actually, I think, probably worked with him as well, because he was also Obama's head. Yeah,
I know Tom particularly well. We sat in a lot of meetings together.
And because you're on the inside, you can tell us whether we were misinterpreting or misinformed. But my understanding is that the reason why Tom Homan deported so many people was because President Obama wanted space for immigration reform. He thought that by doing this, he could get the Republicans on board for immigration reform. Do you think that President Trump and Tom Homan are thinking that right now? Like, hey, if we can deport and show that we've deported enough of certain undocumented folks, that we can go back to Congress and say, listen, this was a problem, I fixed it, now I'm ready for immigration reform?
I think it's possible. I don't think Tom Homan really, he has always been in the business of immigration enforcement and deportation. So I think he thinks in a much narrower lane than President Trump does. On the other hand, I think President Trump has now been on record saying that he understands the value of investor immigration, employment-based immigration, labor immigration, and so I think that does potentially portend the possibility of immigration reform after the electorate sees some easing of what's been going on at the southwest border, and some sense of a robust immigration enforcement. It's possible.
Let's talk a little bit about the big elephant in the room, which is visa retrogression, which we're going on our second or third year, at least in EB-3 unskilled. Basically all the categories except EB-5 and EB-1 are retrogressed now in backlog. From your perspective, where do you see retrogression going? And I'll say that from my perspective, we already, at least on the EB-3 unskilled side, we've already moved ahead a little bit in time. And these things are very, very cyclical. There's never been like 100% retrogression forever and a day, at least outside of India and China. And people will go through a period of applying and then a period of not applying anymore because of retrogression and the way it works. I don't deign that you have a crystal ball, but where do you see things going in terms of visa retrogression?
Yeah, I mean, I think I see there's two different issues with, or two different potential solutions to visa retrogression. One is solving visa retrogression itself,
Mm-hmm.
and either expanding the number, of visa slots available in each year in each category,
Mm-hmm.
doing something for the significantly backlogged countries. But the other issue is, what can you do to help people while they're waiting?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think the main thing that's been done, and which certainly helps us, especially a lot of people in the EB-3 category, is the ability to get work authorization once you've actually
Mm-hmm.
filed for your green card. I think some modification of the rules as to when you can get that work authorization, that would allow you to get that at a much earlier point. I think that's something we can get to even sooner than we can resolve retrogression itself.
Mm-hmm.
And that itself could provide a lot of relief to people.
And speaking of that, that goes back to Doge, right? Like there's this Doge committee. They're in all the parts of the administration now. If you had the ability, and we have John Basilice on our team now from the U.S.
Good for
Chamber.
you.
Yeah. And he knows all these Doge people. He knows all these folks in the administration. What advice would you give to John if John were here? Like, if he's about to go talk to Elon Musk and Doge, like, what are some things that he could do on retrogression?
So me giving John advice on a political matter is probably not the smartest thing for me to be doing. John is somebody who knows what he's doing. But I think, and I imagine John is already mindful of this, but I think even though the big picture immigration political conditions may look a little bleak, this administration does seem to be interested in immigration programs that promote government efficiency, because that's part of the idea of this gold visa, which is, don't know if that's actually going to happen, but I think that's part of so just fill the treasury so that the taxpayers don't have to pay.
Yeah.
But also, immigration that actually is, regularized, it's legal, and it's supportive of U.S. businesses. There does seem to be some opening for a conversation about that with this, certainly with the combination of Elon Musk and Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, someone asked me that, and I said, one thing that I would love to see, and I think I think there's a lot of multiple filings. Like, I think there's a ton of people who file 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 I-140s. And I think that might impact the number of cases that are out there. And it doesn't really seem like, and I would love to hear from you on this, it doesn't seem that USCIS kind of has an incentive to even figure out if you have multiple filings of cases. Or if people are even so interested in doing their case, right? Because I would imagine if you're even Indian or Chinese and you've been in this long wait line for EB-3 or EB-2, it has been like 10, 15 years, you may not even want to do this anymore. But I don't know if the government has a way of finding out from you whether you're still, interested in something like that. Do you think that, like, auditing, like the people figuring out who's double, triple filing, maybe encouraging people like, hey, if you don't want to keep the one, you need to kind of make decisions on which one you want to keep. Do you think that would help retrogression?
It's interesting. Would it actually help retrogression? I'm not sure that it would. I do think, and I'm not sure I'm able to answer that question. There's other people who may understand this issue better than I do, but I'm not. I'm just kind of doing the math in my head here.
Yeah,
I'm not sure that it would.
Yeah. So I talked to we're having David Baer, who works over at the Cato Institute. I think we're having him on next week, and he had said to me, which is really interesting, that 20 to 30% of all the employment-based filings probably aren't real anymore, or that they're double filings, basically. That you have people who, and even there's people who just file multiple I-140s just to have like as a backup, right? Just in case like things go wrong in one category, maybe this is faster, maybe they'll get multiple employers to help them. And, that just got me thinking like, well, like we have this situation where these people are double, triple, quadruple filing I-140s, and there really is no systemic way or systematic way of weeding out what's real versus what's not. And maybe if we had such a system in place, maybe we could get a little bit of more traction on visa retrogression. But I'll talk to Dave Baer about it next week as well. From your perspective,
let me say something about that I think does matter, which is this. USCIS it's a big aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
That the thing that everybody says about aircraft carriers is they're hard to turn. It takes time to turn. And so when you have, every single filing is a workload.
Mm-hmm.
And that slows down USCIS in getting that work done. And in turn, that has probably played a role in those situations where we have years where not all green cards are utilized that could be utilized. Mm-hmm. So, and that certainly contributes to retrogression when that happens. So I, to now maybe give you a little more sophisticated answer to your question, I do think excess workload for USCIS, especially where there's some element of maybe even fraud behind it with multiple filings, as by the way occurred pretty severely in the H-1B context,
right?
Requiring very specific regulatory fixes. I do think that does play a potential role in retrogression.
Yeah, I think it does too. And I think that if there's going to be efficiency someplace, I would like to see it on that. Just like, listen, we have all these people who double filing, you're taking place of somebody who wants to get in the process now. And I think working with John, I think that's something that we would like to push DOJ to look into. If you want to make it more efficient, here are some ways that you can actually make it more efficient for our folks, and all folks in the immigration system, right? And so, in terms of, I think I'd asked this question in the beginning, I want to come back to it. If you have somebody who's like a student visa holder or somebody who's on H-1B, and they're just like, oh man, this is like too scary. All this stuff is going on in the world. Do you think that it's still worth applying for EB-3 unskilled or EB-3 skilled? Is it still worth it? Just because now people are seeing these long wait times and like, man, this is just too hard for me. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always an individual decision. One of the things that I always say is, somehow people keep wanting to come to the United States, no matter how complicated our immigration system has gotten. Mm-hmm. And so, my sense of things is the wait for opportunity can be longer. There is a significant concern about, will you have gaps in employment that you may not be able to sustain, or that your family may not be able to help you sustain. Those are all concerns, but I think in general there is enough opportunity still, and will be for as long as you and I are around, in the United States, that coming to the United States with the eventuality of being able to work and live here, I think remains something really attractive to a lot of people.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I'll just say from my perspective, I've seen immigration change, and you've seen it more than I have, but I've been doing this for about 15 years now. And just when you think that it's set one way, it goes the opposite way, right? And so even with retrogression, there were times when it looked like, oh, visas weren't available, and then a couple of years later, it was current again. It really is cyclical in that way with visa retrogression. So I'm really curious what you think could be some of the things that you can see coming down the pipeline in terms of like retrogression, and in terms of it maybe lessening or even increasing.
I think I think there's always when we get in, there's just an annual cycle where visas get spent out, and so usually in October, we in most categories see some easing of
Hmm.
retrogression. So I think that's one thing that
Hmm.
may potentially be helpful.
Hmm.
And again, I mean, I think going back to the conversation we were having at the beginning, we don't know, even in what seems to be, so, and the other analogy you often hear is sort of the Nixon to China analogy,
Hmm.
that, when things seem least likely is actually potentially exactly when there might be breakthroughs. So
Exactly.
I think
Exactly.
that remains the reality of where we are with where we are with
Immigration. Yeah,
immigration.
and it's always interesting to me that, you know, I've never heard an applicant say to me, "I wish I applied later" to the visa
Right.
process. Like everyone is always like, "I wish I had applied earlier," because like the people who are in line with the process earlier in the process will get any kind of benefits from it. And so I always tell people, get in line now, because you have no idea if the line's going to get longer, is it going to get shorter? And if it does get shorter, it's going to benefit the people at the front of the line. Not to think that's a very simplistic way of thinking of immigration, but in many ways, that's the way it is. And I know there's a lot of questions on Facebook about what's the timing, when can I anticipate X, Y, or Z, and it's just hard because if things change dramatically and fast, what was once like a really long wait time suddenly becomes a really short wait time, and what was once like I'm not going to see an interview for 2-3 years becomes I'm seeing an interview tomorrow, and I've seen that happen in immigration. But what I would like for our audience, and I'll have you do the closing thoughts. But if people in our audience have ideas on ways that they think that the administration can improve immigration, we're all ears. I think that we have the ability to reach Doge. We have the ability to reach people in the White House to explain to them, these are concrete solutions to a lot of these immigration problems. The president has said that he supports legal immigration. Let's give him some ideas on ways that he can support legal immigrants and legal immigration. But I'll leave it with you, Leon, for any final thoughts.
Yeah, no, I think the same. I think the reality is, even with the system, the way it exists right now, and even with all what appear to be sort of political headwinds here in the United States, the reality is that it still remains. You know, we're going to see a lot of people become U.S. citizens. We're going to see a lot of people get green cards this year. None of those things are going to fail to happen because of who's in the White House.
Yeah.
And those people will then thrive. The overwhelming majority of them will thrive and will find opportunity. And so, I still remain personally a cheerleader for the United States and for immigration to the United States, because I think the lesson I learned is no matter who's in the White House, there is opportunity. Look, we have a really low unemployment rate in the United States. And that points to a pretty serious need
Mm-hmm.
to increase our workforce in the U.S. And I think our political leaders are going to wake up to that,
Yeah.
soon enough, and we'll make the needed adjustments to deal with that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I'll say that, what, I've been surprised at, like, so Jim Jordan has said we need immigration reform. Chuck Grassley has said we need immigration reform. So I've been very surprised and hopeful about the people who have come out and say now we need some kind of immigration reform. So my hope is that in the next year or so, we're going to actually see a movement. But even if not, maybe Doge and the Trump administration can enact some stuff that will be beneficial. All right, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining us today. And please leave any messages and we'll definitely respond here at BDV. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.